You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
Hello, hello, hello. How are we all? It's Wednesday. It's the 13th of November. God, this year's marched on, hasn't it? Hasn't it been an amazing year so far? Well, I think it's been an amazing year so far. So much has happened. So much is due to happen. It's been pretty cool. I can't believe it's November already. Scary. Scary how fast this year has gone. Well, I'm now hopefully more or less back in action after Anklegate and the darned ankle snap that I did. Hopefully I should be able to get back out and about, and I've got a private investigation at the end of this month, which I'm very excited about, which you'll all hear about when my new book comes out in the new year. But apart from that, I haven't really got much else booked in, so yeah, if anyone's got an investigation coming up, let me know. Let me know if I can tag along, and if I'm about, I'd love to join you, because I'm kind of getting withdrawal symptoms. I need to get out there. I need to start talking to some spirits, I think. Hi SJ, hi Corinne, hi Wes, wow. Hi guys, thanks for joining us. Well, I'm not going to talk for too long because I've got a good hour's worth of interview to play you with my guest tonight, and all I'll say, Corinne, is go easy on us if we get something wrong. We were trying our best. We needed you there in the background to let us know if we got anything awry, but my guest we had to do the pre-record for this because something came up that he couldn't get out of tonight, but it's a good old interview and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But I will be in the chat room if anyone has any questions, so let me know what you think, and make sure you give me a mark out of 10 for him, Corinne. I mean, you know, I told him something he didn't know, but yeah, give him a mark out of 10. Let him know what homework he's got to do. And so, well, I've spoken to this young man's, shall I say, I don't know, partner in crime on a couple of occasions, the wonderful Corinne Besant, like peasant, as she tells me to say. But this chap and I have never actually managed to speak until now, although you will have heard him on other Parasearch shows. It's the wonderful CJ Symonds. How you doing, lovey?
Thank you for having me on the show. It's really appreciated.
Oh, I've been trying to get you on for a while because I've heard so many good things about you, and then sort of thinking maybe
it's true.
None of it's true. Well, then thinking this wasn't possibly going to happen because something came up, and I was like, no, this is not happening again. So I've sort of literally pinned you down, bent your arm back, and said, come on, let's get this interview done.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
So how is it in sunny Wales?
Very windy, very rainy, and we've forecast on Thursday apparently there's going to be snowstorms and heavy rain, so we're battening down the hatches.
What's the weather normally like? I mean, I know in parts of Wales, like especially like Snowdonia and stuff like that, you do get pretty dire weather. But you're in the south, aren't you? The south of Wales.
I'm in Newport, so really right. I'm on the coastal side of it, and Newport is protected by all the mountains, because there's one of the things in Wales that you're in abundance of is mountains.
Yeah.
And you know, we are lucky. Especially, it's got to be really, really bad if it's a snowstorm or if it's a rainstorm to actually really affect Newport as such.
Okay.
And we know then it's really bad. If it's bad down in Newport, I wouldn't like to think what it would be like up in the Brecon Beacons and the isolated places.
Yeah, it would be. Well, you mentioned the Brecon Beacons, and that kind of links us into what we're going to be talking about, the sort of isolation and the sort of wildness and wilderness and all those wonderful words, because what we're talking about tonight is the Jamaica Inn.
Yeah.
Near Bodmin. I'll say near Bodmin because it's not actually in Bodmin, is it? It's about 9 miles
It's in
outside of
Bodmin.
Yeah, and it's on Bodmin Moor, basically, isn't it? On the moors. And if anyone who hasn't been down to that part of the world, it's the road that... What's the road? Is it the A30 that you drive on?
I think it is. That cuts
that
right
road.
through. Yeah.
I remember when I was there last March... or this March, was it this March? It was this March, wasn't it? When Richard Estep was doing the Bodmin Jail investigation, and I was one of his guest investigators. And on the first night, I think it was the Saturday night, when I got to Bodmin, so after a 5.5 hour drive, he said, "Come to the inn and come and have a beer with us." And so I drove, and the weather was horrendous. I mean, it was driving.
It's brilliant when the weather turns like that, because you can sit down in the lower bed, look out the windows, and
driving to the inn wasn't. That was quite sort of brown trousers moments, because it's just this expanse of wilderness, and that's in the 21st century. So I sort of, as I'm driving through, I'm picturing what it must have been like 300 years previously. And it really must have been... It makes me think of American Werewolf in London as well. You know, when they first find that pub on the moors. Yeah. It's that kind of abandoned sort of... Almost what is it? Abandoned hope, all ye who enter here kind of feeling. It's... But it's so this place just appears, and most people have said it's actually not that easy to find if you don't follow the brown tourist signs. It's not obvious. Once you found it, you know where it is, and it's quite easy to find again. And I know that, wasn't it last winter they put up loads of people who had to abandon their cars?
Yeah, the bad snowstorm. Lots of people were trapped in their cars, and our manager then, Sammy, sent out some of the staff, because obviously they had 4x4s and stuff, to pick the people up off the motorway and bring them back to the inn. To actually make sure they had somewhere to go and somewhere to sleep. I'm very lucky that we wasn't down there, because we never had that as bad up where I live. But down there, it was really, really bad. I was in contact with them, and God love them, they all the staff turned up to help out. They really put the stops out to try it. But not just the inn, other places as well did exactly the same. Yeah.
But that, having met Sammy, it doesn't surprise me. Talk about a warm person. And the place itself, it's we're going to look a bit at the history before we start looking at the spooky side. But it was a coaching inn built in 1750 on the Is it Launceston or Launceston? I can never know how to pronounce that.
Launceston. I call it Launceston. A lot of people call it different.
Okay, that one. And the Bodmin Turnpike. It was also... and then about 20 years later, 30 years later, it was extended slightly to provide more stables so they could do horse changes for the coaching inns.
The was built, Yeah,
and everything else. But interestingly enough, I was reading up the records, and there's actually been a building on that site since about 1547.
Exactly. Yes.
It's always interesting.
It's strange, because at some point it was also used as a farm, and we've actually seen the pictures of because right opposite the Jamaica Inn is a white house, and it's called the Jamaica Inn Farmhouse, and that is older than the inn, I believe. Although I might get corrected a little bit by our Corinne, but I'm sure that the Jamaica Inn Farmhouse is a little bit older than the actual inn itself. And the pictures that I've seen and looked up, because one valuable bit of information that you get is from the locals. Local knowledge is so important to an area. And some of the locals, the older ones that have come up, we've tried to get them interviewed, but they shy off from it because they don't really want to. But what they come out with is brilliant, and it's little tinges, insights into what actually was going on at that place. And, I refer to the Smugglers Museum. I mean, at one time, that was a cowshed. And there was cows in it. So, it was used as a functioning farm as well. And then, obviously, I often sit back and think, who would put an inn in the middle of a farm? Weird.
It is a bit, but it's the Cornish for you.
Yeah,
I grew up in Norfolk, and they're very similar.
Yeah, but I think it's a great idea because obviously, if you can just imagine, take away the new motorway that cut right the way through it, it couldn't have been positioned better, to be quite honest with you, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was on the main road as it was then.
Yes.
So, and like I say, it was on the turnpike as well. So people would have had to come through it. They would have been doing the main run from Launceston to Bodmin, so they would have come past it. They needed to change their horses.
Well, that's why I think the inn. I might be not 100% accurate on it, but I mean that's why the inn was there was because the main coaching house was at Launceston, which was the White Hart, and the arcade that was in there, which is right by the side of it, was all the stables. And they used to stable about 60, 70 horses in there. So going on down to that way, they would rest the horses and feed the horses. And again, that's what with the inn, because they're all coaching inns all the way going down.
No, I love spotting a coaching inn when I'm driving around. You can normally spot them quite easily as well. But so it was built in 1750 by the Trelawneys, who were a local family. But it was originally called the New Inn. That's correct, yeah.
Because I was just going to bring up to that, because it's always been known as the Jamaica Inn. See, it was the New Inn at one time.
It was. See, I do my research, CJ.
Yeah, I'm quite chuffed.
But do you know why it was called the Jamaica Inn?
Well, it was the Jamaica Inn because of the governor of Jamaica Inn. When he came up, he died in Jamaica.
He was one of the Trelawneys.
He was one of the Trelawneys, and I don't know off the top of my head. I would probably have Corinne, if she's listening, screaming down the phone. But I think it was named the Jamaica Inn in his honour. Yeah,
there's two speculations as to why it was called the Jamaica Inn. One is to do with smuggling rum from Jamaica, because obviously the smuggling connection. I think that one's a bit simple. I personally think it would have been to do with the fact that Trelawneys were a local family, a local well-respected family. One of them, they were governors of Jamaica. One of them died in Jamaica, and therefore it was renamed the Jamaica Inn to pay homage to him. Yeah. But originally it was called the New Inn. Now, we mentioned, I alluded to the smuggling side of it. I don't think the inn itself is the only thing to have involved in smuggling in that part of the world. Obviously, Cornwall there was a percentage I read that something about the percentage of smuggling that came in through that part of Cornwall was like 80% or something.
Yeah.
Something ridiculous like that. And when you see the shoreline, you can kind of understand the locals would know the ebbs and flows of the tides, would know where the rocks were, would find it probably quite easy to cause it to happen.
But if you imagine where the inn is situated, and you imagine where the coasts are, where with the smugglers, and they would, offload their contraband. That was a hell of a way for them to drag the contraband down to the Jamaica Inn. Now, it wouldn't have just been the Jamaica Inn. There would have been caches all over Bodmin Moor. I often wondered if you could take off the 5 foot of the layer of Bodmin Moor and lift it up in the air and have a look underneath. You'd probably be amazed at what you will find.
Well, when you think about all the mine shafts that are going to be around as well, all the different, like you say, hidey holes.
Yeah. And, it was relevant in that area as well for the tin miners, because that's when you go down, you see all these lovely little pools. Well, at one time they were tin mines. So you had all that going on at the same time. Yep. And there's a little bit of a confusion because a lot of people have come up and used the term wreckers, and they thought a wrecker is a smuggler. Well, actually, that's not true. A wrecker is different from a smuggler. A wrecker was what they would refer to as the tin miners, because if a ship did ground, they wouldn't just leave the ship there to rot. So they would probably have somebody come down or people to take it apart, because they would use the riggings, they would use all sorts to actually dismantle the ship, because it wouldn't just be left there. And to be quite honest with you, that was what was more likely a wrecker, was another terminology for tin miners.
The ultimate in recycling.
Yeah, exactly. And there's only been one known case of somebody referred to as a wrecker And unfortunately, back in the day, it was terrible. It was a young lad. Now, the name, I'm not sure of the name, but he was walking down or coming out, skipping down a road, and what he had in his hand was a bit of rigging. Mm-hmm. And he had the unfortunate been bumped into what we refer to as the peelers, the police. Mm-hmm. And he was arrested.
As in Robert Peel?
Yeah, he was arrested and convicted of being a wrecker. It's the only conviction that I've managed to find. And he must have been in his, between the age of 9 and maybe 13. So a very young lad. Mm. And that's the only term of a wrecker being actually caught and prosecuted. And it was a young boy. Mm.
I think there's a lot of these older things that people have kind of made them into something they're not. Yeah. I mean, one of my passions from the sort of Victorian era to talk about is the workhouse movement and the asylums. Yeah. And, you know, everyone paints them this really negative picture. Mm. But what they don't realise is you weren't forced into the workhouse. No. You weren't. You went in on your own volition. And for a lot of people who went into them, it stopped them starving to death on the streets. It stopped them being, you know, not having albeit a shared bed, but somewhere to put their head down at night that was reasonably safe. And yes, it was hard work, but it was a different society back then. It's the same with the asylums. I mean, yes, some of the stuff they did we look at now with modern eyes and think it's barbaric, but you might be surprised at how many sort of techniques they mastered in the Victorian era that we now still use, albeit in a slightly different way, and everything has to start somewhere. So I kind of think with the wreckers, because it sounds so dramatic, it's like when you talk about pirates in the modern day context, people still think, "Who are Jimmy, my lad?" But there are pirates. Exactly. There are still pirates. Piracy is still a thing, but they don't walk around with the barret on their shoulder and a cap covering their eye or patch covering their eye. So.
But so is smuggling, because smuggling's still going on to this present day.
Just a bit. Just a bit. Drug smuggling, all that kind. Smuggling gold, smuggling blood diamonds, smuggling. Yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing new. But again, it's never stopped. It's like a lot of things. It was around then. It's around now, just in a different format. But how did you get involved
with the inn? Well, we're coming up, funny enough, we're coming up to 5 years anniversary of being there as the paranormal team. Mm-hmm. But it was strange because I've always felt drawn down there. It all comes down to my mother because she used to love going down to the Jamaica Inn. Mm-hmm. I never went with her when she went down to the Jamaica Inn, but she used to, because she was one of these people that would get on a coach with a pile of people, go down to the Jamaica Inn, and she would have lunch. She would have a little look around, go into the gift shop, and then she would travel 3.5, 4 hours all the way back up. And that was a day. And she used to do that regular. And she did take some of my sisters, I believe, one time down there, but I never did. But sadly, I lost my mum. And it was strange how it came about, how I got involved, because I contacted the inn because I wanted to see if I could investigate it. Mm-hmm. And I was told at the time with the other owner that obviously another company does what we do. Mm-hmm. So we had to go through them. And they didn't really allow private investigations, but you could join them on a public one. Mm-hmm. Then the inn changed hands about 5 years ago. And I thought, here's an opportunity. So me and Corinne were talking, and I thought, all right, I'll brace it. I'll give another call. And we actually started speaking with a woman down there called Amanda, who was the original person that run the Jamaica Inn Paranormal Team. And we got involved through that. So we went down and joined them. She wasn't experienced. We were. So she used us for our experience as such. But we did it for a little while. Then we stepped away from it, myself and Corinne, and I believe Amanda left the team, and they didn't have a paranormal team. And then one night I'm sat in the house, and my phone rings, and it's my boss. I refer to him as my boss. It's Alan Jackson. Mm-hmm. And I pick up the phone, and I think, wonder why Alan's ringing me. And it's when he said to me, he said, Colin, he said, I really need you to come back down. Could you come back down and run the team, set up the team again? And obviously I was thrilled about that. I immediately then after that conversation phoned up Corinne and screamed down the phone to Corinne, we're going back to the Jamaica Inn. I went down there once or twice, and then because I was part of the BPA. Can you remember that organisation that was around, the British Paranormal, whatever it was? It was set up to a BPA, apparently it was, and I was part of that. Okay. So I went there to do something, a little investigation, pre-investigation there. And then me and Corinne started going back down, and I just took on the leadership of the team, to be quite honest, and everything else is history, really. We've been there now coming up to 5 years, and I'm hoping we'll be there for another 5 years, to be quite honest with it.
Okay, so, I mean, I think the thing is with the Jamaica Inn, a lot of times people confuse fact with fiction when it comes to the inn.
Yes, yeah.
One of the things I would say is most famous for is the amazing Daphne du Maurier's book,
yes.
The Jamaica Inn.
It's a funny story I'll tell you about Daphne, to be quite honest with you.
Well, the only thing I'm going to say is when originally we were going to do the show last summer, I went into the local library to try and get a copy of the Jamaica Inn so I could read it, and there was no Daphne du Maurier books on the shelves, not one. And so I went to the the information desk and said, have you got any Daphne du Maurier books? And the girl goes, who? I went, Daphne du Maurier. Who's she? She's a very well-known author. How do you spell that? And I stood there and I thought, she's working in a library. I mean, I should give her the benefit of the doubt. It might have been a Saturday job, I suppose, but she'd never heard of Daphne du Maurier. And I thought, well, I grew up on that kind of thing. Maybe it's just, my generation, or maybe it's the fact my mum loved Daphne du Maurier, so I read things like Rebecca and those kind of ones, but it shocked me that she hadn't heard of her, and I found that quite a few people are like, who, which I think is a real shame. But the original film, the black and white version of Jamaica Inn, the film is brilliant. I can watch it, but I do think people confuse her drama, her fiction, with fact. And the reason I'm going to say that is I do Googles when I'm doing research for a show. I'll type in weird things into Google to see what it throws back up at me. And one of them I put in was murders at the Jamaica Inn.
You're going to go talk about Josh, aren't you?
I am talking about Joss Merlin, and it comes up, and this person had put a photo and saying there's a plaque to this man who was murdered here, and I'm thinking that name rings a bell. Why does that name ring a bell? And then because I did a search for Joss Merlin, because I was sure that he wasn't murdered, and of course he comes up as one of the main characters. He's a fictional character, and this person was saying how they'd seen the site where Joss Merlin was, and they weren't doing it ironically. They genuinely thought this Joss Merlin was killed at the inn, and that kind of, I thought that was quite funny, and it is, I guess that is an occupational hazard when you write a book about a specific place.
The plaque was put in there by I believe put there by the production company that did the Jamaica Inn. The plaque has moved now, but funny enough, talking about this plaque, I was only talking to the owner not so long ago, who is an absolute fanatic on Daphne du Maurier. What he's bought and what he's purchased, because we've got new exhibits about Daphne.
Oh, right.
We've got new letters that are personal letters that were written from royalty to her and her to royalty, and a lot of her other stuff. I think he went, and we also have quite a lot of her, I believe it's her chair and her desk.
Yes, it is her chair and her desk, because Richard Estep got to sit in it when he was there in March.
Yeah, he owes me a big bloody favour for that, to be quite honest with you. The owner does not allow anybody to go in there. So he was rather honoured to be able. But when Richard came down, him being a writer as well, I could not we just couldn't say no to him, to let him go in and sit at the desk where Daphne wrote, her novels and stuff. And I've got to be quite honest, even now I can picture his face when he was sat up there. He was like a kid in a candy shop.
He was sending me pictures before he even put them on Facebook, because I'd come home by that point, and he was like, look where I am. And the only thing is about Daphne du Maurier, I didn't realise until relatively recently, she also wrote the story of the Alfred Hitchcock film that is the worst film for me to watch. I can't cope with it. I don't get scared by anything.
1933 film, is it? 33, 34?
It's The Birds.
Yeah, the Birds. Yeah.
I didn't realise she wrote the story for it. I hate that film. I'm scared of birds. I can't.
Well, you've shocked me, actually, because I didn't know that she wrote that, neither.
No, well, I only found... It was actually Richard's wife who told me, and I was like, did she? I should have known it, but I didn't. But yeah, she wrote... It was a short story she wrote called The Birds that Alfred Hitchcock then picked up and made the film about. And I used to like Daphne until I found out she instigated that particular story, because I can't listen to that film. I can't watch that film, even with the sound off. It's one of the few horror films that actually does...
Freak you out?
Freak me out. Not many do. I don't think any have.
I think the main thing of that film that I remember is all them birds on the overhead wires.
Oh, don't. I used to have that happen to me, and I used to have horses. First thing in the morning, you go down, and literally, on the pylons, on the electric, it was just rows and rows of crows. And I remember one time it was like something apocalyptic was about to happen. No, I can't do it. They say modern day films with all their CGI and everything. No, that one I can't.
They do freak you out. I used to love watching the old black and white horror films, especially the Dracula ones and the vampire.
Honestly, Psycho is one of my favourite films of all time, and I think it's scarier than some of the modern day stuff you can get.
Yeah, they knew how to make a film back in the day.
Yeah, it's the element of suggestion. But anyway, so she wrote The Birds, and she was only, I think, 29 or 30 when she actually wrote Jamaica Inn, which is quite a young age for a novelist. But she was quite amazing herself. Her ashes are actually scattered at Foy, or Fowie, depending on how you want to pronounce it, but it's Foy. Yeah. That's where her ashes are scattered. But her husband himself was pretty amazing. Sir Frederick Browning. He was actually the father of the British Airborne. And he was one of the people who took part in Operation Market Garden, which I find it interesting who then one of the subsequent owners of the pub was.
We've actually, I believe we have a uniform down in the Smugglers Museum, which is the part of the Daphne part, which I think it was his uniform. I'm not sure. I have to double check on that, but I think it was his Air Force uniform.
Well, he was his pretty pivotal character in World War II, which is then what makes it interesting who one of the subsequent owners of the inn was, Alistair MacLean.
Yeah.
He didn't own it for very long because it didn't make the money he wanted, but when it comes to writers, I'm probably more into his stuff with the military side than I am hers. But that one, I think it's really got a sort of a writer's history to it, the inn itself.
Yeah.
There are some other things I'm going to talk about in a sec that are associated with the inn. Sorry, what were you going to say there, CJ?
We have recently discovered that we now believe we know which room that Daphne actually stayed in and wrote the Jamaica Inn in. And we believe it's room 4, which is one of the, funny enough, it's one of our haunted bedrooms.
It's one of the ones I wrote down to ask you about, actually.
But one of the funniest stories about Daphne is when she wrote it, when she came down to the Jamaica Inn, there's a story that she actually had a friend with her, and they went horse riding up onto the wall. And it started to get really, really late, and I believe it started to rain because the weather comes in really fast. So they were panicked a little bit because they got a little bit lost. And Daphne was apparently quite happy to stay in one of these little stables that they came across, but her friend was more insistent to try to get back to the Jamaica Inn. And they put their trust in the horses that they had, and the horses led them back to the Jamaica Inn. And funny enough, when they got back, the owner then which I believe was Bert Horrell, he was just about to send out a lantern search party for him because they got really, really worried. It's a nice little story to it that she was down there. But, we now have been told that, room 4 was possibly the room that she did actually write it in. And we've always wanted to know where she actually wrote the Jamaica Inn. And that's where she come.
Well, I can actually believe that story. Because, I used to have horses, and a couple of times when I was riding one in these woods, and I couldn't for the life of me work out how to get back out, how to get back to stables, I literally just threw the reins away and said, "Take us home, then," and she did. So yeah. It's a perfectly plausible story. But you mentioned room 4 being one of the haunted rooms. What are the other sort of? Well,
we've got 4 haunted rooms. We've got room 3. Which is the 4-poster, room 4, which is the 4-poster, room 5, 4-poster, and room 6, 4-poster. But we've recently discovered some information which we came across because of a lovely lady that came up and spoke to us at the inn. She used to work at the Jamaica Inn when she was a child. And she's, I think, in her 60s at the moment. And when we would go on around, we took Rob with us, which is the maintenance manager of the inn, because obviously Rob, he knows where all the old doors used to be, which are all being put up and stuff. So he was getting really excited because everything was tallying in with what he had seen, because the inn has changed over many different years. Yeah. There's been adds on to it. But we did discover that we haven't got 4 haunted rooms. We've actually got 5.
Right.
And it's because one of the rooms, which is room 6, a lot of people have reported seeing a tall man standing in the bathroom. And he stands in the doorway. And we've had a number of different reports of guests that have come up and said, I had the jitteries in there. And, we woke up, we've seen this shadow. But we often wondered, well, why does he stand in the bathroom? Is he a pervert or something? Why does he not just enter into the room 6? Well, it was discovered that the bathroom was, in fact, another bedroom.
Right.
And the door to that was outside where we've got the linen. So it had all been altered. So that explains to me why people see this figure of this man standing in the doorway, is because there wasn't a doorway there. It was a wall. That room had been turned into a bathroom at some stage in its life. So it was really fascinating. But okay. If you go outside and you stand on the road looking directly into the Jamaica Inn, I mean, when you see the 2 chimney stacks, everything between the chimney stacks is the original Jamaica Inn.
Yeah.
Room 5 and room 6, and this now 5th room was added on at a later stage. And the same on the opposite side, which was where you walk through the bar to go into the Smugglers Museum. That wasn't there at one time. That was open. And the original stairs were where you go in through the main entrance to go into the bar. That's where the original staircase was to go up to the bedroom. Because when we've gone up there and looked, and Rob, he's fantastic. He's the maintenance manager there. He's a wealth of knowledge, because obviously he's been over the Jamaica Inn like a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah.
And he pointed out that if you look on the wall, when you look in between room 3 and room 4, you will still see the remnants of a staircase that was still going up into the attic.
All right.
So there's a lot more to discover at the Jamaica Inn than just the ghost. The building has its own history.
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting when you go into a building, say as a builder. So my husband used to do loft conversions, and the stuff he'd find as he starts pulling stuff out to build into it, and it's brilliant. You never know. I think I was talking to someone who ran the Strangers' Hall Museum in Norwich, and they said they had to replace some of the floorboards because they were rotting, and they pulled them up and they found toys from the Victorian era had been put under the floorboards. And things like that, and you just never know whether you're going to find walls that you didn't know were there, or doors that you didn't know would have been there, or false ceilings, or whatever it is. It's brilliant. So, going back to these rooms that have had the most activity shall we say, reported. What kind of activity is there, and what kind of research have you and Corinne then done to see if there's any validity in it?
Well, with the room 5, let's start with room 5, which is what they refer to Hannah's room. And that only came about because of a popular TV program that came down to the Jamaica Inn many, many years ago and was picked up by a medium there. However, when you take away the folklore, what you discover by doing the research is that there were people at that time. There was a woman there, and she was a maid, and the name was Mary. And we think, personally, looking it up, because it all fits in, you see, that this Mary was a member of staff, and she actually got pregnant by one of the landlords. And she took the landlord to court to prove that her baby was in fact the father. You could really call it. It was one of the very first child support cases, I should imagine, and she won the case, and he had to recognise the child as his. Corinne's got more information on it, but I think it might have been one of the Duns. I'm not sure, but don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure Corinne will be screaming down somewhere in the comments and putting that correct if I am incorrect. But in room 5, it has been reported that there has been a woman seen in the mirror and felt a presence. We can only go on what guests have reported back to us. But also in room 5, a couple of years back, we actually had a soldier in the military that actually stayed in the room. And the next day when the staff came in, they found him outside in his Jeep. And the windows were all misted up. So they were quite curious. What were you doing? Why were you sleeping in the Jeep? And to cut a long story short, during the night, he had some sort of experience in the room. And basically, when he got up to turn the light on, when he looked down to the floor, he actually seen wet footprints of a child going right away around the bed. And it was wet footprints by all accounts. So it was enough to freak him out that he left the room. In fact, he accused the staff of going in whilst he was asleep and actually playing a practical joke on him. And that never happened. So the then general manager, which was Sammy, I believe, did actually go up there and take a photograph. And when we arrived, she showed me the photograph of it. And mulbitide, right on a picture on her phone, there was children's wet footprints going right way around the bed. And funny enough, it was going from the window all the way around the bed, and it was leading off as if it was going into the bathroom, which is adjoined in the room. Right. We don't know if that's been altered in any way. There could have been a door there at one point. But it freaked him out so much, and it was strange enough that I was telling this story to a number of guests in that room when I had a lady that was sat on the bed, and she actually said to me, well, actually, I know all about it. And I said, how do you know all about it? Because I was quite curious. She turned around and she said, this is a couple of years later, mind, I think it was back last year. And she turned around and she said it was my son. And that's the reason why we've come on the investigation, because we wanted to know what frightened him enough, what scared him here. And it was fascinating to talk to her. Apparently he's overseas at the moment, and he's still serving military, God bless him. Apparently she's going to speak with him when he comes back to see if we can actually sit down with him and get it from the horse's mouth, as one would say. Or what actually took place, what freaked him out in there. And one of the things would have been those footprints. But Sammy had the picture of it, and it was really surprising, to be quite honest. So what was a child's footprints doing in that bedroom?
Is it on the ground floor, that one, or is it first floor?
No, it's the first floor.
Right.
It's the one in the corner. You've got room 3, then you've got room 4, then you walk down the corridor, you've got room 5, and then you've got room 6. Okay. And it's in the add-on part of the inn, and that's what's interesting about it. But we've had many guests have come back, have stayed, not ones that have been on the investigations. There's a massive down there which records everybody's experience. We've had a quick look through there, and there seems to be a pattern coming from the rooms. And obviously we have to take away folklore, fact, and people being scared. But, you know, when you look through back into the history of it, you know, there are people that were there at particular times. And one instant, we had a room 7, which is a single room. It used to be the staff room. And my very first experience there was with Amanda, the original team leader.
Yeah.
And we sat there doing a live EVP, and we were playing it back. And we were sat on the settee, close up, listening to it. And all of a sudden, between the two of us, we heard, "There's a baby in here." And we both looked at each other, really shocked, and got so excited because we thought, "Oh my God, look what we've caught on EVP." So
Class A. Class A EVP, yeah.
It was clear as day. And if Amanda was there, she would tell you about this, because it freaked us out, because it was that loud. So we ran out, we went to Corinne and a couple of others that were there, because it was a private investigation. And we said, listen to this. So we're playing it back, and there's nothing on there. And then it dawned on us. What we actually heard, we heard in real time as we were playing it back. It wasn't on the EVP. Mm-hmm. And that freaked us right out. And that was in room 7, and that's the single room. It used to be the staff room at one point, before all the new development of it and where the staff room got moved, and it's now a single room.
Right.
And I stay in there, and I get the chills when I stay in there. And some of the rooms, room 4, for instance, when I stay in there, I'll be honest with you, I'll be truthful, I have the closet light on. I don't sleep in the dark in there.
It would be. I'll tell you what would be an interesting experiment to do. Would be to change the room numbers for someone who's never been before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think I'd be quite interested, because of the fact it is all over the internet, the specific rooms and everything else.
Yes.
I think, and I am a believer, even though I believe in the paranormal. I'm also skeptical.
Yeah, exactly.
There is an element of suggestion. No, Jamaica Inn, it's got a spooky past with the smuggling links and everything, even though a lot of that is fabricated from the fiction. But you can also, if I ever stayed and I go to room 5, it's already in the back of my mind.
There are
something
some
might
things,
happen.
Penny, that we deliberately don't put out there.
Right.
And that's how we do it. And if we get a hit on it, we record it. Because there are some things that we've not revealed and we won't reveal, because that is all part and parcel of us getting some sort of validation on what's going on. And that's very, very important. But a lot of groups have investigated it. We've opened it up. We don't just do the public nights. I took the decision myself to open it up for private teams to come in, because I'm a strong believer that, they should have an opportunity to come down. We do have quite a few, some that have come back on a regular basis because they absolutely love it there. But at the end of the day, I've always said people that come to the Jamaica Inn must take away what they take away of it. There's that we will put words in their mouth. It's when we do the public investigations, it's down to the guests what they pick up. Yeah. We're just there. We don't lead it. We're just there as guides.
I'm not saying that you guys would lead it, but someone you're going to have a certain image as you go in there, and especially if you haven't talked to other people. I would just love to hear what happens if you change the room numbers for someone who didn't know it. Just for the night. We would have
to change the doors, because unfortunately they're all named. And again, they're all fictional characters of the Jamaica Inn. From a Daphne.
There goes that idea.
However, and here's the twist to it. Room 3 recently has been shut down because it's going through renovation. The owner is he's very, very on point in how the inn is presented, and he's going to change all the haunted rooms. They'll stay in a similar context. They'll probably still have the 4 posters in there. He wants to bring it up more into a modern way and modern stay. And room 3 is the first room that is actually being renovated at the moment, and that's going to have a sitting room and a bathroom.
Ooh, so it's going to be a suite.
Yes, it's going to be a suite, because at one time there used to be the 2 bunk beds and a double bed, so you could get 4 in there. Now it's reverting back to just 2 people, but it'll be more of a suite in there. And he wants to bring it up into that because he's got a passion about it, Alan. He's got a very good passion about and he believes in the Jamaica Inn. He's passionate about about Daphne du Maurier. I mean, he has spent thousands on exhibits to pour out. There's an awful lot more I could say, but I'm restricted in what I can say. But all I can say is next year is going to be even bigger and better.
I've thought of a way you could do it, though, for someone, say if I came, because I've only ever been in the bar area. That makes me sound like a right lush. I've only ever been in the bar area. I've never seen the rooms. Is literally before I go to the rooms, you blindfold the person so they don't know which room they're being put in.
Yes,
exactly. Almost do a blind test like that.
Though, outside, have you ever heard of the funhouse effect when you're walking on floorboards? It's up in slightly. That's what we have in the hallway. Outside when you're walking down, people that have been there actually can tell which direction they're going in from the floorboards.
So is it almost like you're on a ship, like you're swaying almost?
Yes.
Could that be down to the fact that some of the wood from the building could have been requisitioned from ships that had run ashore?
Now you've hit a very interesting question actually on that.
Okay.
Because again, Rob, the maintenance manager, he's actually stated, and we've heard from guests as well that live down that area, that some of the wood that is in the Jamaica Inn, not all of it, but a majority of the wood, have come from a shipyard. Mm-hmm. So they would have been part of probably ships. Mm-hmm. Being wrecked. Again, we're going back to the wrecking side of it.
Or recycling, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah, up in the attic, the one attic, which not always is available to go up there, but there are some up there. As soon as you look at it, you can see, hang on a minute, the way that's looking, that's from a ship easily. And who's to say? We talk about how spirits can be attached to objects. Mm-hmm. Spirits be attached to wooden items like that.
No reason why not. No reason why not at all. So you said room 4 scares you.
Yeah.
Why?
Room 4, I don't know what it is in room 4. Corinne was in room 3 with one of the other investigators when we were staying over, and I went into room 4, and we normally prank one another and have a laugh at the end of the night as such, and Corinne's the world's worst for it. So they decided to try and prank me. So in the end, it didn't happen. But I could hear somebody knocking on my door. So I actually get out of bed because I'm tired and I'm like ready to scream at her. Will you knock it off? I open the door and she's not out there, and the light wasn't on because it's uncensored light. Okay. And then I could hear the scratching on the wall, and I'm thinking, oh, you little mare. She's gone in where the bunk beds are and she's scratching the wall, the two of them, to wind me up, sort of thing. Until the next day, when I said to them, what was all that scratching about? And she said, what do you mean scratching? She said, we didn't do it, Colin. We decided not to do it in the end. And she said, and actually we were hearing the scratching as well. So we were both hearing scratching in the room, or movement in the room, in both rooms, and we both thought it was either one of us that was doing it, and we hadn't done it. But that room, I don't know what it is. I'd like to know that that's the room that Daphne stayed in, but it just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
So you say that that's part of the add-on bit, like room 5, yes. Room 4. When was that added on?
No, room 3 and room 4
are
actually original rooms.
They're original. And you said room 5 is the added on.
Room 5 and room 6, at some point in the history of the inn, that part was added onto the inn.
But we're not 100% sure when.
We're not 100% sure when, but I have found a for sale site, which actually it comes from 12th of September 1871, and it's quite interesting because in this for sale advertisement, because the Jamaica Inn was up for sale, they tell you about the rooms, and they say the house contains 17 rooms. So at some point, the Jamaica Inn had 17 actual rooms, and go on to give the dimensions of the room. But what caught my attention, because a lot of people have said, it was a pub, did it have a cellar? And we're like, well, no, it never had a cellar. Until I discovered this, it says in there, cellar and larder, 8 rooms and a water closet. in the rooms being following the dimensions, and it gives the dimensions. It does mention about a cellar, and a lot of people have come up and said, well, you know, I think there is, especially mediums, I think there's something under the ground, but there isn't any main cellar that would be underneath the inn, because it sits on an outcrop of a rock, so it's granite. So I think they refer into a cellar here, which is a cellar above ground, not below ground. But it does mention a cellar. And I find that interesting. And not only that, we know that there was a well there as well.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me.
Well, actually, a lot of people, that's one of the things we don't tell people, see. There was a well there, but where was the well? That's the question. And that's what we look out for if people come up and they say, oh, I feel a little bit... Because we know exactly where the well is, thanks to the maintenance manager, you see. I
see. Well, it wouldn't surprise me for an inn to be built on the site of a well, because an inn, especially in the olden days, would have needed water to brew its beer, because some of them would brew beer on site.
In this instant, the water that was obtained at one point came down from the parish church.
Right.
And it was a water wheel. And there was a tap that was put into the somewhere outside the inn where the locals would be able to get their fresh water. Now the water would be pumped up into two 500-gallon containers that were probably buried in the ground somewhere at some where it would fill in, and that's where the inn took its water from. But it's strange to know that there was a well as well. But it all depends on what sort of period of time it all fits into, because the inn has definitely changed.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, we are actually getting reports on the new side now, which is as where the reception is, you've got the new block, and then at the bottom you've got a newer block, which is all the modern day accommodation. And we're actually now getting reports from guests that are not on the investigation, but guests coming up to reception and saying, we've had a lot of things happen to us in these rooms. But what people don't realise is them buildings follow the same outline as the old sheds that used to be there at the Jamaica Inn.
That's one of the conversations I was actually having with someone recently, when they were saying, well, this building wasn't here 50 years ago, so why would you be experiencing stuff in here? And it's like, well, it doesn't actually have to be the actual building itself. It could be just the land it's on, the spirits, sort of almost, whether it's a sentient spirit or a residual. They're attached to that specific place, and it doesn't really matter what you put on it. They will still be attached to that place. And now there's rooms there. They've got something. They've got energy to pull. They've got humans to pull energy from to do stuff. And they've almost got an audience.
The owner, Alan Jackson, when he first started staying at the inn, God bless him, every time he used to come down, it was, Colin, come over quick, I need to talk to you. He was terrorised for months and months and months in the room that he was staying. Every time, at a certain time at night, he'll have on his door, you'll get out of bed to go to the door, and the outside lights are not on.
So it's residual.
So it's residual, but they would be knocking on his door. And if you speak to Alan, and I always encourage people, if you see him down the inn, because he's always there, talk to him about it, because he'll be quite open to say, yeah, it terrorised me. Every time I always used to look forward, what's happened now, Al? And say, I've had the knocking on the doors again. And strangely enough, the new room, which is room 23, I had an experience in there because we were staying in there. And I had 3 taps on the front door, and exactly at the same time, I had 3 taps at the patio door, and the room went icy cold. There was such a feeling of, I don't know how to. It didn't scare me. It worried me. It worried me that much that I got out of bed and I actually left the room and went and stayed down in the residence lounge. And the next day, when I was laying in there, I could see the lights coming on and off, and I couldn't figure out why, because a moth wouldn't, or an insect wouldn't trigger the lights. It's that sense that they're that rigged to pick up body heat and stuff. And when the owner Alan come in, and I explained to Alan, because he found it funny that the staff found me asleep in the residence lounge, and Corinne was left in the room. And I said, well, because I really had an experience. So we went to view the CCTV.
Yeah.
And right at the time that the knocks took place, the sensor lights came on, and there was nobody outside. And then straight away you see me hurrying, rushedly, down the road, down the corridor, into the residence lounge, where I turned the telly on and I had the light on. Because we can't explain why that happens, but we've had other guests saying that have stayed in room 23 that have said they've also found their stuff moved. Credit cards, their wallets chucked out on the floor, and they know that they had put them away. So it's quite interesting what's happening around that area, because we would expect it on the older part, but not the newer part.
But it kind of makes sense to me if it's on the site of what would have been like things like the old sheds and the old cow sheds and the old farm outbuildings and stuff. You would have had youngsters working on the farm who were a bit mischievous.
Yes.
It could be one of them. It could be anything. It could be anything linked to that land. But one of the other hauntings I read about that I don't know if you've experienced is a lot of people have said they've heard horses' hooves clattering outside.
Yes.
Right, you've heard that one too.
Yeah, a lot of people have come up and they've said in the past, not recently, but in the past, they've come up and said, "Oh, we've heard horses' hooves on the cobbles outside," and it sounds as if a cart had been pulled up. Which back in the day, that's exactly what would have happened.
I'm going to give you some answers to that.
But there's a problem here.
Go on.
Because the cobbles that are outside are not original to the Jamaica Inn. They come from Bodmin itself. The original that would have been outside would have been just stone dust. So it's interesting when people say they hear the hooves of horses on the cobbles, but the cobbles were probably, good knows, about 30, 40 years, probably, maybe a little bit longer than that when they were placed up in there. And obviously the entrances were a little bit different as well.
Well, I've got a potential reason what they're hearing and why they're hearing it. I found at least 3 different, on different occasion, news articles in the newspapers ranging from about 1815 to 1840 odd. The road that the pub is on, the inn is on, what used to be the main road, has got some very, very sharp hills with then a turn on it, and the mail coaches that used to take passengers as well, they used to have to lock their wheel at the top of the hill so that they wouldn't go too fast down the steep hill. And there's at least 3 separate occasions of them not doing it properly, and the mail cart crashing, and the horses all running and being caught at the inn courtyard.
Ah, right. That's interesting.
Yeah, 3 different articles of different occasions as well, not the same accident. Now, it doesn't say that anyone died, although it did say that the people who were riding on the outside of the coaches were quite severely injured. Whether any of them died following that, and in fact 2 of them apparently were taken to the inn for treatment whilst they waited for the surgeon.
That's interesting, because obviously we've had reports of a spirit down in the main bar named Jack that apparently was supposed to have left the inn. This is, I think, more folklore than anything, and was attacked and killed and buried on the moor. But we fondly refer to him as Jack. But I think that's more folklore. But with what you're saying, who's to say? Who's to say that it's not somebody that an accident having occurred? Because one of the things that was quite interesting was who had actually visited the inn over the years, and there's been quite a lot. Diana Dawes, she came down. We've never got any accounts or anything, or written accounts from it, but we were told that Diana Dawes was down there. And during World War II, one of the generals, Patton, I think his name is, he was apparently supposed to have stayed at the inn, and he's supposed to have had ham and eggs. And we've got to thank Richard Essop, really, because when we were back last year, when we were talking to him, no, it was the first year, the year before, when we were talking to him, and we told him about this, because Corinne started to look into the soldiers that were based there, and all around, because of D-Day, they practiced there. He found an extract from a diary of a soldier that was based down around the inn. He may have been based at Davistow. And it actually stated that Patton and a few others actually addressed the soldiers on a buff in the shadow of the inn. Now, we actually think this is the Jamaica Inn that he had actually stayed at, but there's no reference that we can find at the moment that actually said he stayed at that inn. But we also know that, royalty has probably gone past there and probably have called in at the time. But what's really interesting is Bolventa is a very, very small place.
It's tiny, yeah.
It's very tiny. So tell me this. Why was there 28 Home Guard posted to Bolventa?
Who knows?
28 Home Guard was posted at Bolventa. Now, obviously, we know that you had Davistow, you had the troops, you had the manoeuvres going on and stuff, but we suspect, and it's only a suspicion, that probably the inn would have probably been used at some point for meetings, maybe, which was not recorded as such. So we're currently looking into that at present, because obviously there's a number of different phases the inn has gone through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's quite fascinating, but it's always questioned, why was there just 28 Home Guard? I mean, in Newport, where I lived, my father was in the Home Guard. There wasn't 28 people a year.
No.
28.
No.
I tell you
well,
that.
it's plausible. I mean, I didn't find anything like that. That would be records I'd really have to go digging for, because some of them might even still be covered under the Official Secrets Act. But
well, that's what we think. But
yeah.
Richard S. actually did find, I don't know where he went. He went online, because we were talking about, Corinne even contacted the veterans in America to try to find out, and she found it difficult. And then Richard just came along, sat on there, just went on his computer and went bum, 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 and then turned it around and said, there's a diary, an extract from the diary of one of the soldiers that were here that actually recounted that. So,
who knows? Who knows what I might find for you when I'm digging one night on the internet and something. But well, I do know that inquests in the 1800s, the pub was used for them. Because I found the account of one in the 1800s, an inquest into a chap who died whilst riding on the underneath of a cart or something. He was drunk and he got rolled over, and the inquest. So I don't know whether that means his body was taken there for holding or what. So it would make sense, and it would be quite sort of off the beaten track. They'd be able to guard it quite easily if the highfalutin officers were there. So it's sort of.
I did come across one account that one person did contact me, and they were referring to the main bar, because at one point that wasn't the bar. The original bar is Mary's Bar, which is the small snug bar, and the snug area used to be their living room, where at one point that's where they lived. But basically they were saying that this guy came out and he said he can recall when he was young going there and seeing a trap door, and it only went down a little distance behind the bar, and right above it used to be a hook, and he swore blind that they used to hang people. They used to put them up onto the hook, and with the little trap door, it only went down a little bit, but it was enough to hang them. Now I think
it's more likely the trap door had kegs or something underneath, and they used the hook to help pull the kegs up.
More than probably, exactly. But these are the stories that actually people come up and say, and he was convinced over it, absolutely convinced over it. I mean, obviously, I went and looked, and I couldn't find anything, to be quite honest. But we're willing to listen to anybody that has an experience or they have a remember. But do you know what the real mystery of the Jamaica Inn is?
Go on.
Whatever happened to Percy?
Percy
the parrot. The Jamaica Inn parrot.
I think that's a story for another day.
Well, we had to dig up, and unfortunately we dug up his box, and Percy wasn't in the box.
Oh.
So there's the mystery, and we also know that he was ill, pulling out his feathers because of the nicotine that people were smoking in the pub, and he was supposed to have gone to a sanctuary. We contacted that sanctuary, and Percy never arrived. That's the real mystery for me.
There you go. That's the one for the conspiracy theorists to look into, isn't it, CJ? Well, that's our hour, my love. We've been chatting for an hour. How was it? Was I too harsh on you, or was it okay?
You were all right. You were fine. I just hope I was okay to you.
And did I tell you any history stuff that isn't actually that boring and that was quite interesting?
No, it was very interesting. You did.
The male coach thing. I thought you'd like that one.
The male coach is particular of interest because I've come across a picture with a Royal Mail coach outside the inn. And that actually does interest me, to be quite honest.
It did say in one of the articles it was a hotspot for accidents because of where it was on the road and the fact it was a very deep, a sharp hill and then a sharp bend. So there you go. That might explain the horses clattering in. It's a replay.
That could be it. Mm-hmm. The only thing, as I've said, I've questioned about it is, it wasn't cobbles at one time. It was stone. But at the end of the day, it's interesting, and I quite like listening to the stories, to be quite honest.
Definitely.
And if there's truth to them, then, that's even more the better.
So if someone wants to join you on an investigation of the inn, how do they go about doing it, mate?
They can contact the inn because, one quick point, we're not an event company, the Jamaica Inn Paranormal Team. We're not an event. We don't handle money. It's the Jamaica Inn that deals with all that. We are just their paranormal team. Okay. So if people want to come and join us, they can either go onto the Jamaica Inn website, which is jamaicainn.co.uk, I think, or you can actually join the Facebook page, which is the Jamaica Inn Paranormal Investigation page. Awesome. And we actually put up we advertise on there. But what we are finding is we're getting a lot of people who are coming back. And they're coming on word of mouth because they enjoy the investigation because nothing's put on for them. And that's what's important. That's really important to have that come back. And we're quite sold out until, I think, next February.
Brilliant. Well, I didn't do an investigation when I came to the Jamaica Inn, sadly, but I did have to have one of their leek and mushroom pies. And I can tell you what, it's worth the 5.5 hour drive just for that. It was blooming delicious.
Well, I've said to Kerry in the past as well, when I've spoke to Kerry about it, and I've given her an invite, and if you want to come down, we'd be more than happy to show you around and give you an investigation. Maybe you can convince our Kerry to come along, and I kill two birds with one stone.
Literally. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight, CJ. I really do appreciate it. I'm glad we've finally got to talk, and it will be interesting to see the comments that Corinne's made about all the history stuff.
She'll probably be in there. Don't you worry about that.
I'll be getting messages from her afterwards saying, you should have asked me this. So, But anyway, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Well, that's been CJ Symonds of the Jamaica Inn Paranormal Team. I hope that's, if nothing else, it's whet your appetite to go to the inn and experience it for real. Next week, I'm going to be hopefully talking to Christopher Chell all about the Leopard Inn in Stoke. Because it seems to be all about pubs at the moment, doesn't it? If anyone think I had a problem. I don't. It's just the way the cookies crumbled. But so I do hope you join me for that. Don't forget, tomorrow night, PSH Radio Show, and then Friday night is the Dark Mirror Show. But if you miss any of the shows, fret ye not. Head on over to Spreaker or YouTube, and you can listen to them at your heart's content. But don't forget, if you go to YouTube, to hit click, like, share, and subscribe, and share it with all your friends. Invite them all to the Parasearch party. But on that note, thank you ever so much for listening. Have a good evening. Sleep tight. And don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.